One of the most insidious dangers of fentanyl in South Florida and nationally is that it is killing people who have no idea they're consuming the illicit synthetic drug. The fentanyl crisis is a focus of local and state law enforcement, including Florida's Attorney General. And on a national level this week, it was a focus on President Biden's meeting with China President Xi Jinping. We have an opportunity today to detail what that means with the White House drug czar himself. First, though, a look at the fight on the supply side. Janine Stanwood starts us off.
The human cost is really devastating, and it's one of the reasons why we are so motivated to make sure we are doing all we can.
We speak exclusively with Christy Canigallo, the #2 at the Department of Homeland Security, as the department just announced it's doubling down on efforts to fight the fentanyl epidemic.
We're trying to develop intelligence where we're going after the networks of smugglers.
Sad today, it's a drooping 60-year-old girl.
Last spring, we went to the southern border with Mexico, where most of the drugs are arriving, to see firsthand U.S. Border Patrol agents seizing fentanyl taped to suspected smugglers' bodies.
Package, imagine one side from her hip all the way up to her bra, tucked underneath there.
The tiny pills are sometimes stuffed in car parts, crock pots, and artwork to get through ports of entry like here in Nogales. While traditional tools like this X-ray and drug-sniffing dogs are used every day, now these new devices are being deployed, called multi-energy portals,
which are basically a way that we can screen a car that is coming up to a checkpoint before it arrives at the checkpoint.
This one under construction in Nogales is now complete. We're told the scanners will increase inspections significantly, 20 times more passenger vehicles, 4 times more cargo trucks. CBP says the goal is to get them at every port of entry in the country.
We need to stop the flow of this drug, this poison.
That's something that we're working on day in and day out. It really is a constant effort, though, because smugglers, they are motivated, they are agile, and we are too.
Thanks to Janine Stanwood, and right here live with us today, U.S. drug czar Dr. Rahul Gupta, officially the White House Director of National Drug Control Policy. Dr. Gupta, so great to have you on the program.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate you.
So this issue, such an issue in South Florida, there is supply and there is demand. The supply being, I suppose, people who are addicted and people who may not even know what they're taking. And then that's the demand side. And then the supply side, of course, the traffickers. So fill us in, give us the headlines. Let's start very generally. What are the new initiatives that your office is handling?
Certainly, I think one of the important pieces is to look at this holistically. President Biden's strategy for the country goes after 2 key drivers, which is untreated addiction, as well as the trafficking profits, the profits that come out of the drug trade, basically. So when we look at the untreated addiction, we have historic expansion of access to treatment, availability of naloxone or Narcan, which is the antidote now available over the counter. At the same time, we have to make supply less available and treatment more available. Part of that's making sure that, obviously I've been to Nogales myself. I've seen the value and the importance of these drug detection machines. And this is exactly why. It's been a priority, top focus of the president to make sure that we have these machines at every ports of entry so that every vehicle that needs to be scanned for gets scanned for. But at the same time, have expansion of the Customs Border Protection agents, as well as work with our partner nations and allies, as well as countries like China, who are shipping these chemicals to Mexico to be converted into fentanyl.
So let me just pick up where you are leaving off right there, because you've just set up a beautiful segue into the news of the week, which is the president's meeting with President Xi of China this week on the West Coast. And this was one of the huge components in what appears to be a cooperative effort and a very sort of delicate diplomatic dance that the president is doing. But what is specifically China's role in supplying the U.S. portion of fentanyl?
Well, so a lot of the chemicals that ultimately get turned into fentanyl, often in Mexico, are coming from China. A lot of the supplies like pill pressers and dye molds that used to make these fake or counterfeit pills are also coming from China. So China has had an outsized role in the production supply chain of fentanyl and synthetic drugs. It is why this meeting and the decision to resume our counter narcotics cooperation was so critical, because China does have the ability to clamp down on its illicit network of the chemical industry and transnational criminal organizations.
Does China consider it illicit? Is there a role to play somehow of this network in something beneficial to the Chinese community? So how would you know you can trust the government's participation in this?
Yeah, I think China has seen, I think for its own people, the scourge of addiction and what happens. So it understands that very well. The question becomes is how much will they be willing to, mean the Chinese government, clamp down and apply their rules and regulations. And in fact, just last week, they've issued notice to the industry, their own industry, that they're going to be implementing rules and laws around this. We also want the Chinese government to look at what gets shipped and mislabeled to make sure that there's proper labeling when these chemicals are being shipped. And then folks know, their industry knows who they're shipping to. Sometimes they're shipped from broker to broker. And that doesn't give us a lot of transparency or accountability when often it's being shipped to cartels in Mexico. So they have this ability. Obviously, our relationship and restarting allows us now to work with them to make sure that they are working to be a part of the solution when the world needs leadership of China when it comes to counter narcotics aspects.
Dr. Gupta, I know you are not into like the political back and forth that goes on in Washington, but I do have to raise the issue with most Republican Party is very wary about China and the relationship and any kind of diplomatic ties, especially in Florida. The Republicans in Florida do a lot of work to actually freeze out the Chinese government. Do you see any kind of what should be a very bipartisan effort and is in the fentanyl issue? Do you see politics getting in the way of the good work that you're trying to do?
I honestly don't. I think this is one area, not only is this in a part of President Biden's bipartisan unity agenda for the nation to defeat the opioid crisis, but this is, at a time when we're so polarized in Washington. This is an area where people from all backgrounds and both parties come together to solve issues. And this is something that is critical to the United States, but to the whole world, that we hold China accountable for its action when it comes to illicit supply of chemicals and equipment. So I think this is one where both parties can get behind. I'm pretty sure that they will get behind, because historically, politics is not one of the things that people worry about when it comes to saving lives of Americans. And we are losing an American every 5 minutes around the clock. So getting help to people, the resources, as well as going after bad actors is not only good for the nation, but it's important and urgent.
I think the number I saw last was 110,000 fentanyl deaths just in the last year. Dr. Gupta, we have a quick break to take, but when we come back, I have a couple more questions for you. I want to take it back to the border and talk a little bit about money. So we'll see you back here in just about 2 minutes. We are back with this wonderful opportunity to speak with White House Director of National Drug Control Policy, Dr. Rahul Gupta, for our purposes in TV, the drug czar, talking about stopping the fentanyl scourge, fentanyl deaths that South Florida really does reel from. Dr. Gupta, the state of Florida does a lot in this regard, but I want to kind of pass by for you a quote from the Attorney General of Florida, Ashley Moody, who recently said fentanyl from Mexico is flooding our country. Is she right?
Well, I mean, look, we have had the highest numbers of seizures last year than we've ever done. We've had a lot of domestic seizures as well as on the border. The fact that we're catching more, well, we have to continue to work with our partners in Mexico, in Canada, in China, and other countries. So the issue becomes not one of how much, but we need to go to the source and what drives these folks and go after that.
I know you in your ear could hear the report that we preceded our interview with from Janine Stanwood in Nogales and all of those resources that are at the border. Part and parcel of the border story, of course, is migration and immigration. And if you read the tea leaves and read the polls, the immigration currently is a real Achilles heel for President Biden's administration. And I know there's a lot of work going on that. But how kind of play that intersection for me. How do you weed out the cartels and the drug smugglers in real time from migrants?
That's a great question. So I've been to several parts of the border, including Nogales, as you've shown. And when I speak to both the Customs Border Protection and border, force there, as well as individuals and mayors and other elected officials, and the facts bear out is this, that most of the drugs that are being smuggled, even in your piece, are coming through the ports of entry. That's where more than 90% of the drugs come through. And of course, the migration piece happens between the ports of entry. But if you think about it just from a common sense, maybe a business perspective, the goal of these producers is to get their product across as quickly as possible to retail. That doesn't mean go through the rugged terrain of the border and while they are victimizing oftentimes migrants, also add volume to their, that is cargo worth thousands of dollars. So the focus should remain when it comes to drug smuggling and trafficking on what works and where the evidence shows us. That shows us we've got to have better technology at the ports of entry. We got to focus at the ports of entry. And this is exactly why President Biden has made it a top priority to have drug detection machines at the ports of entry. If you ask me how much of the passenger vehicle gets scanned, historically across all administrations that are coming through the southern border, it's 2%. You believe that? 2%. And the president wants to make sure that 100% of every vehicle that needs to be scanned gets scanned.
That's now, kind of an eye-popping number. Definitely an eye-popping number. Yeah.
And this is the president who wants to fix it.
In the Dr. Gupta, in the short time we have left together, I want to just talk about the demand side. There was the Support Act. I'm not quite sure I know what the acronym is. Essentially, it was opioid treatment support, and it expired in, I think, at the end of September. So there's kind of a Support Act 2.0 waiting for a floor vote right now. Do you expect that that will be a significant component of this?
Absolutely. I mean, look, Congress needs to act. And, those in Washington understand that. Support Act reauthorization is important because that's the legal way that states like Florida and communities like South Florida are able to get the resources to people who need it desperately. And this is why the president has added and requested Congress for a supplemental billions of dollars for both border security and increasing access to treatment for people. So, at the end of the day, this is about saving lives. This is about life and death. Some of these resources can be the difference between somebody making it or we're having an empty chair at the dinner table, especially during the holidays. So, as a physician, I feel that this is critically important that Congress act to pass not just the Support Act to reauthorize, but also the president's request for supplemental, because the communities that are suffering do need that assistance. We need to expand treatment. We need to get naloxone or Narcan to anyone who's, having an overdose. These are important things, and they mean a lot to a lot of people because almost no family across country, if you look at, is not touched by this epidemic.
Yeah, that's true. And in fact, we took a little sort of internal poll here, and you're so right. My producer was telling me he knows 2 people who have died from fentanyl overdoses mistakenly. Heartbreaking. One more question before we let you go, because there is a real trend now on social media, which is always, either good or bad, depending on the user. Commercial enterprises, illicit commercial enterprises, fishing on social media for people looking for real relief, pain relief, looking for, honestly, drugs or prescriptions, and targeting on social media those people as fentanyl customers. Are you aware of that? Is that something that you're focused on?
Yes, and yes. I've had high-level meetings with some of these social media companies, got to know what they're doing and what more they need to do. We've talked about them being accountable. But at the same time, what is really happening is people need to know this, which is when you go to the social media in the palm of your hand and orders what you think is a Xanax or a OxyContin or an Adderall, the chances are 6 out of 10 that they will have potentially fatal dose of fentanyl.
Wow,
That's 6 out of 10, and that's odds worse than playing Russian roulette with your life.
that is
So
an
be
incredible
careful.
number.
And if you need help, yeah, go to a provider, get your help that you need, get an appointment. Do not rely on social media to get your medications. It is just not safe at best and probably going to be fatal at worst.
Wow. Dr. Rahul Gupta, the National Director of White House Director of National Drug Control Policy. Drugs are so much easier for us to call you. So appreciate you being on with us live from DC, and definitely a topic we will be continuing to cover.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, and happy holidays.
You too. Thank you.